She was among the wealthiest women in technology. Yet the instant she witnessed a quiet cafe waiter nurturing her disabled daughter, her entire belief system concerning success, worth, and human connection began to unravel. The lunch was meant to be nothing extravagant. No aides, no security detail, no cameras, just a serene corner table by the window at Bramble Street Cafe in Worcester, Massachusetts, where rain streaked the glass like a slowly flowing watercolor. Cassandra Blythe had grown accustomed to being in the spotlight. Whether she found herself in boardrooms in Palo Alto or at fundraising events in Los Angeles, people paid attention when she entered. This was partly due to her status as the founder of one of the world's leading AI companies, but also because she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had the answers to every question asked in the room. But not in this instance, and certainly not from him. He didn't even look her way, didn't react when she spoke, nor did he blink when the hostess quietly breathed her name. Instead, he knelt beside her daughter Mia, as if the billionaire at the table were non-existent. Cassandra halted mid-sip, observing intently, torn between annoyance and intrigue. Mia, age 9, non-verbal, and confined to a wheelchair, was a child whose cerebral palsy had limited her mobility and her patience for strangers who perceived her as fragile. Most people treated her that way. They would crouch down, raise their voices excessively, and ask her permission to breathe. But this young man, in his early 20s, tall and wiry, with a buzz cut and gentle brown eyes, didn't do any of that. "Hey, superstar," he said softly, balancing a steaming bowl of tomato bisque on a tray. "You ready for the good stuff?" Mia didn't respond with words, she never did, but the slight tilt of her head and the focus of her eyes on him spoke volumes. He placed the bowl in front of her, set the spoon down, and flashed a lopsided grin. "Don't worry, I'm certified in epic soup feeding. Pretty sure that's a legitimate degree." Cassandra raised her eyebrows. Was he making a joke at her expense? The waiter, whose name tag read Evan, scooped a small amount of soup to test the temperature on the back of his hand, then gently brought it to Mia's mouth. She opened without hesitation. He didn't hesitate. He dabbed her chin with a cloth napkin after the second spoonful and continued speaking softly as though they were old friends. Cassandra had not seen Mia smile like that in weeks. She blinked, uncertain why this affected her so deeply. Her daughter's nurse was late, stuck in traffic on I-290. Cassandra hadn't planned on feeding Mia herself, not for lack of desire, but rather because she genuinely didn't know how. Not really. She was honest with herself about that. When life revolves around meetings, deadlines, and private jets, sometimes feeding your own child becomes just another item on an already busy checklist, squeezed between Zoom calls and product launches. She observed as Mia actually giggled, truly giggled when Evan made a dramatic gesture by sticking out his tongue. It stung because Cassandra hadn't managed to elicit a sound from Mia in days. Yet this stranger, this cafe waiter with no knowledge of who she was, achieved it in mere minutes. She reclined in her chair, arms crossed over her designer coat, still watching while her salad remained untouched. Her phone buzzed once, then again, and again. She didn't even look at it. The cafe buzzed on around her, dishes clanking, low conversations rising and falling, the aroma of cinnamon and yeast wafting from the bakery counter. But her focus remained solely on this moment. Evan didn't merely serve the soup. He connected. There was no awkwardness, no tension. He didn't treat Mia as though she were broken. That was what set this apart. Cassandra had been told countless times how beautiful Mia was, how sweet, how brave, but Evan didn't label her as brave or anything at all. He just engaged her, and for once, Mia wasn't merely the daughter of a billionaire or the girl in a wheelchair. She was just a child enjoying soup with someone who made her laugh. What Cassandra didn't yet realize was that this singular moment, this small, quiet occurrence, was about to dismantle every notion she held regarding people, kindness, and what genuinely mattered. Evan Michaels had held numerous jobs, but this cafe was his favorite. It certainly wasn't about the money. He knew the tips barely covered rent, but it offered tranquility, and the regulars didn't pry too much. For a guy who preferred to stay in the background, it worked. But Mia wasn't a regular, nor was she loud. Yet something about her presence drew people in, not in a dramatic fashion, but with a gentle curiosity, an energy that made you lean in, often without realizing it. He offered her another spoonful, being careful not to spill a drop. "You ever had soup this good?" he asked with a crooked grin. "Yeah, me." "Neither. Chef must have added magic or something." Mia responded with a soft hum, then adjusted her fingers on the tray, eyes flickering between him and the window. Evan followed her gaze. "Rain's kind of nice." "Ha," he remarked. "Gives you an excuse to slow down." Cassandra continued to observe from the booth's corner, still silent and uncertain whether to interject. Part of her yearned to quip in, to remind him of who she was, not out of a need for recognition, but because she felt confused by this sudden surge of warmth and guilt. Instead, she held her tongue. Evan turned to her momentarily. "Would it be okay if I asked her name?" Cassandra nodded, just once. "Mia," he reiterated, then turned back to the girl. "Well, Mia, thanks for letting me hang out with you. I know I'm not the easiest guy to eat soup with." She gave a slight sound in acknowledgement, not quite a laugh, but nearly. Evan smiled again, a soft, genuine smile, the kind that people don't fake. "I used to babysit my cousin back in Portland. He had a feeding tube and couldn't talk, but he made it clear how he felt with one look." He recalled, glancing at Cassandra. "Kids don't need words to tell you who they are." Cassandra cleared her throat not out of necessity, but because her chest tightened in a way that took her by surprise. "You're good with her," she said. Evan looked up, meeting her gaze. "Thanks. She's easy to like." It wasn't flattery. There was no compliment intended to impress, just honesty. It was this transparency that surprised Cassandra the most. He had no idea who she was, and even now, as he began sensing something different about her, he continued treating Mia as a person first. "Do you work here full-time?" she inquired. He shook his head. "A couple shifts a week. I mainly pick up work wherever I can. Deliveries, handyman stuff, anything that pays enough to keep the lights on." There was no self-pity in his tone, no badge of struggle, just facts. "I thought I'd try nursing school a while back," he continued, "but it didn't work out. My mom got sick, and, well, you know how things can snowball." Cassandra narrowed her eyes slightly. "Your mom, is she okay now?" Evan looked down momentarily. 2 years ago, heart failure. Medicaid delays didn't help. There it was again, that quiet honesty, no drama, just life as it unfolded. And he didn't appear bitter about it, not angry, just weary but with an openness that still permitted room for kindness. "You live nearby?" she asked. "Edge of Grafton," he replied. "Room above a garage. Not glamorous, but it's mine." Mia made a slight motion with her fingers, brushing them against her lap. Evan noticed her and chuckled. "You want to try holding the spoon?" he asked gently, adjusting her hand around it. "All right, boss. Let's see what you've got." She managed to guide it a couple of inches before it tipped. He caught the drip with a napkin and gave her a thumbs up. 10 out of 10. You're officially promoted. Cassandra couldn't tear her eyes away. It felt like she was observing something significant, but she couldn't articulate why. Nothing massive occurred. No dramatic music. No grand gestures. Just a girl, a waiter, and a bowl of soup. But somewhere within this brief instance, something had shifted within her. She didn't know his last name, didn't know where he went after his shift, or if he even possessed a car, but she recognized this. He had truly seen her daughter, not as a burden, not as an obligation, but as a human being. For a mother like Cassandra, who had spent years hiding behind polished glass and rigid routines, that authenticity was rare. Yet what she didn't anticipate was how profoundly that simple act would compel her to scrutinize everything, including the kind of mother she had truly been. Once Mia's bowl was empty, Evan set the spoon down, wiped her chin gently, and rose with a soft exhale. Cassandra had hardly touched her salad, her fork precariously balanced on the edge of her plate, as if unsure what to do with it. "Thank you," she uttered quietly. Evan began to gather the dishes. "No problem. She's awesome." Cassandra hesitated, then, without overthinking, asked, "Do you have a minute?" He paused, nodded once, and slid into the booth opposite her. She wasn't accustomed to strangers sitting without asking for permission, but, again, it didn't irk her. It intrigued her. "I'm Cassandra." She introduced herself. "Cassandra Blythe." Evan raised an eyebrow. The name landed not like a bomb, but more like a delayed ignition. Recognition flickered across his face. "Oh," he replied, blinking. "That Cassandra Blythe." She nodded. "Yeah, I built Neuralis Technologies." Evan leaned back slightly. "Processing. I thought your name sounded familiar. That's big-time stuff. You're essentially one of the architects of the future." Cassandra nearly smiled but held back. "It sounds impressive until it's just you alone trying to feed your daughter soup." Evan didn't respond right away. That thoughtful. Silence wasn't uncomfortable. It made her sit up straighter. He didn't hasten to disrupt it. He allowed it to breathe. "I wasn't trying to impress you," he finally said. "I know," she replied, tapping her nails against the side of her water glass, her gaze unwavering. "Most people do." "I'm not most people," he replied quietly, then glanced toward Mia, who was now gazing out the window with drowsy eyes. "And she doesn't care who you are. She just wants you to sit with her." The words resonated deeper than they should have. Cassandra lowered her voice. "I didn't always have money. My parents were teachers. I worked my way through college and coded at night, but now everything's behind glass. I get driven places. I hardly handle cash. I forget what normal feels like." Evan looked at her as if uncertain whether she was sharing or confessing. Perhaps both. "I figured you'd know how things are," he said. "But you don't, do you?" "What do you do when you're not here?" she inquired. shifting the conversation. It depends. Some yard work, fixing up old bikes for a community center down the street. I've been helping a kid learn to ride again after his accident. You always help people? She asked. He shrugged. Not always, but when I can. It doesn't cost much to treat people like they matter. Cassandra leaned in, genuinely curious. Has anyone ever helped you in that way? His expression darkened a fraction. Once. My mum. She used to say that the way you treat people when nobody's watching is what truly counts. It took me a while to comprehend that, but it stuck. Cassandra felt her phone buzzing in her purse once more. She ignored it. I want to offer you something, she stated abruptly. Evan tilted his head. Was it a tip? She shook her head. Not at all. I'm not hiring you. I want to fund what you're already doing. Quietly, anonymously, if you'd prefer. Evan's face remained still. I'm serious, she insisted. You clearly possess intuition based on the way you engaged with her. It's what my entire team lacks. Authentic human connection. He remained silent for a moment before leaning forward. Why me? He asked. There are 1,000 engineers who'd kill for that position. Precisely, she said. They're engineers. You're something else. He didn't smile or nod. He simply regarded her, his fingers lightly tapping the table. I genuinely appreciate the offer. He replied slowly, but I'm going to have to decline. Cassandra blinked, taken aback. What? Why? He glanced toward Mia once more, his voice muted. Because I don't believe I belong in offices. I don't want to become someone who forgets what it's truly like to listen, to actually listen. Cassandra was not accustomed to being turned down, particularly after extending a chance most people could only dream of. Yet here he was, gently but firmly declining her offer. But she didn't know yet that this was not the conclusion of their story. It was merely the segment where everything began to pivot for both of them. The ride home was silent, punctuated only by the gentle sound of the windshield wipers slicing through the rain. Mia had drifted off in the back seat, her head resting gently against the side of her booster seat. Cassandra glanced at her through the rearview mirror, her mind far from traffic, her meeting that evening, or the emails piling up in her inbox. Instead, she pondered Evan's voice echoing in her mind, because I don't want to become someone who forgets what it's like to listen. Those words had landed like a pebble dropped into a still lake, small yet creating ripples of contemplation. Cassandra Blythe had established her empire by paying attention to data, market shifts, and user trends. But when had she last truly listened to a person who wasn't attempting to sell her something? She thought about contacting her assistant to obtain Evan's information in hopes of reaching out again through a more formal route. Yet something about that felt misguided, as if it would overlook the essence of the moment, turning something genuine into a transaction. And so she waited. 3 days passed. Then 5. She continued returning to the same cafe, at the same time each day, hoping he would appear for a shift. He didn't. The young woman behind the counter informed her that he had taken some time off for family matters, adding nonchalantly, "He's around. Try the church on Mason Street. He volunteers there." Cassandra wasn't religious and hadn't set foot in a church in years, but that Sunday, after dropping Mia off at therapy, she drove straight to it. The small red brick building had a sagging fence and a patchy lawn. No cameras, no fanfare, just a handful of children chasing a soccer ball in the back parking lot. She parked and exited the car. tightening her coat against the wind. A boy with thick glasses and a cast on his leg waved before calling out, "Hey, Mr. Evan. Someone's here to see you." A moment later, Evan appeared from around the side of the building, wiping his hands on his jeans. He looked taken aback, but not ill at ease. "You actually tracked me down," he said. "I wanted to understand," she replied. Evan nodded, gesturing to a bench near the sidewalk. They sat, the wood creaking slightly beneath them. "You offered me a way out," he stated, not unkindly, "but I'm not trying to escape." "I wasn't trying to rescue you," Cassandra responded. "I merely thought it was the least I could do." "You did something already," he remarked, glancing at the kids in the yard. "You listened." She looked down at her hands, admitting, "I'm not accustomed to being told no." "I figured," he said with a half-smile, "but I also believed you'd be the type to honor honesty." That caught her off guard. "I've spent years assuming that only progress matters, building and growing, but lately—" She paused, feeling strange admitting vulnerability to someone she barely knew, yet with Evan, it felt easier than with most. "Lately, I feel as though I'm watching my life from behind glass. I can see it, even admire it, but I cannot touch it." Evan fell silent for a long moment, then replied, "Your daughter touches it." Her silence was profound. "You know," she mused, "you're likely the first person in a decade who didn't ask me for something." Evan chuckled. "You think offering a six-figure job wasn't asking?" "Touché," she conceded. They sat in quietude for a while, just listening to the wind whisking through the trees and the laughter of the kids playing soccer with a half-deflated ball. For the first time in days, she didn't rush. "I won't try to change your mind," she finally said, "but if you ever want to discuss anything, I'd like to keep the door open." He nodded. "I appreciate that." She stood up to leave, but hesitated. "By the way, do you enjoy coffee?" He raised an eyebrow. "Sure. Why?" She smiled, small but authentic. "Come by the cafe Thursday. I'll bring the soup this time." But Evan didn't know that behind her smile, Cassandra had decided to go further than a simple invitation, because while he had turned down her world, she wasn't ready to let go of his. Thursday arrived, accompanied by a grey sky and a chill that penetrated into her sleeves and refused to leave. Cassandra dressed simply, not as a CO, no heels, no blazer, no curated accessories, just a cozy sweater, jeans, and a thermos of tomato bisque in a brown paper bag. It felt unfamiliar but not unpleasant. After dropping Mia off at school, she drove to Grafton, passing strip malls, cracked sidewalks, and corner stores that had not updated their signage in decades. She located the address Evan had mentioned, a small one-story garage behind a modest blue duplex. The front light was out, the yard was cluttered with tools, and a few rusted bicycles leaned against the fence. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure of why. Then the door swung open, revealing Evan in a hoodie with paint-splattered pants, a smudge of something grey on his cheek. "I'm not late, am I?" she asked, lifting the bag. He grinned. "You brought soup. It's your turn to sit," she replied. Inside, the space was cramped but tidy. A twin mattress leaned against the far wall below a single window. A mismatched bookshelf held a series of mugs and stacks of library books. A small hot plate sat beside an old mini-fridge, humming gently. But what captivated her attention was the wall covered in Polaroids. Dozens of them. Kids beaming while wearing bike helmets. A girl showing off her new prosthetic leg. An elderly man proudly holding up a repaired cane, all tagged in scratchy pen with names and short notes. Danny, first ride without training wheels. She read aloud. Evan nodded. I take photos of everyone who stops by the center. It reminds me of who I'm doing this for. Cassandra turned slowly. You didn't mention that you run a community center. I don't. He replied with a shrug. It's not formal. No paperwork. No funding. Just a few rooms I rent from the church and whatever donations I can scrape together. But you fix bikes and play a vital role. She trailed off, looking back at the smiling faces in the photos he displayed. Evan stated nonchalantly, sometimes it's just about showing up. Cassandra didn't speak for a moment before handing him the soup as she settled into a folding chair by the window. You know I could fund all of this in 10 minutes, right? She noted. I figured so. Why haven't you asked? Because if people believe you're doing it for a paycheck, they stop trusting you, Evan replied. I'm not trying to save the world. I'm merely attempting to make a dent in it. And those photographs remind me that small things mean a lot. A smile, a repair, an hour spent just listening. You'd be surprised how far that goes when no one else is paying attention. Cassandra leaned back, her gaze drifting to the photos once again. You know, I spent $10 million last year on a marketing campaign to promote inclusion. We had influencers, press kits, consultants, but none of it felt half as genuine as this wall. He regarded her thoughtfully. You don't have to throw money at everything. Sometimes, just showing up, soup in hand, accomplishes more than writing a check. She nodded gradually. Maybe that's where I've erred. They continued their lunch in quietude, without needing more inquiries. Just two individuals on very different paths, nestled in a garage that felt more vibrant than any boardroom she had ever inhabited. After lunch, Evan walked her to the exit. You're always welcome here, he said. She observed him intently for a moment before responding. I think you've helped me more than I could ever repay you. But the truth was, she hadn't even begun to help him. Not in the manner that would soon follow. And when that came, it wouldn't involve contracts or deals. Rather, it would kick off with a simple question from her daughter. A week later, Cassandra sat beside Mia at the kitchen table, attempting, mostly in vain, to braid her daughter's delicate, flyaway hair. Early sunlight streamed through the windows, catching specks of dust in the air. Mia's speech therapist was running late, so Cassandra had taken the morning off. While she still struggled with these moments, she was making an effort. Almost done, she murmured, holding a section of Mia's hair as if it might shatter. Well, close enough. Mia's fingers tapped against the tray of her chair, glancing towards a now-pinned photo on the fridge, a Polaroid that Evan had gifted them, showcasing her with a toy wrench in one hand and him grinning next to her, both coated in bike grease. Do you want to see Evan again? Cassandra asked. Mia's eyes shifted from her to the photo. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. That was all the affirmation Cassandra required. Later that afternoon, they drove back to the church on Mason Street, but instead of the usual select few kids, the lot was filled with folding tables, crock pots, and music pouring from a tinny speaker. Evan waved as they arrived. Hey, rock star, he called out to Mia. You made it just in time. We're about to crown the grilled cheese champion. Mia lit up. They lingered for hours. Cassandra engaged with a woman managing a local shelter, and another man shared how Evan had helped him obtain a second-hand wheelchair for his nephew. Every story differed, but they all revolved around a single theme. Evan showed up. He paid attention. He made people feel visible. That humbled her. As the sun began dipping lower in the sky and people commenced clearing the tables, Cassandra approached Evan near the makeshift grill. "I have a different kind of offer," she remarked. He raised an eyebrow. "No strings, no company logos. I'm not hiring you," she said. "I want to fund what you're doing already, quietly, anonymously if you'd prefer." Evan wiped his hands on a towel. "You sure?" "I'm very certain." He scrutinized her face. "Why?" "Because my daughter asked to see you. Because you taught me more in a single afternoon than most executives have in years. And because the world needs more individuals who decline the wrong opportunities, even when it's tough." Evan glanced toward Mia, who was now observing a dog chasing Bubbles in the yard. He smiled slowly and sincerely. "I'll think about it," he replied. 2 weeks later, Cassandra established a private foundation. Not a public announcement, no social media bluster, simply a bank account, legal paperwork, and a pledge to fund Evan's community center without any questions. He utilized the funds for new plumbing, constructing an accessibility ramp, and transforming 2 surplus rooms into a homework area and art studio. But it wasn't just the financial aid that shifted circumstances. Evan taught Cassandra how to repair bikes, and she guided him on crafting grant proposals. Mia began accompanying them every Saturday, helping organize books and distributing crayons. People began ceasing to see her simply as the billionaire's daughter. They just called her Mia. Cassandra learned how to braid properly, how to listen without formulating her response, how to simply be. And Evan, he ultimately stopped living in anticipation of the next calamity. He started sleeping better, laughing more, allowing himself to accept help, not because he needed it, but because he finally felt it was permissible. They never designated a name for what they established together. It wasn't a partnership. It wasn't a mentorship. It was something quieter, deeper, respect, connection, mutual purpose, where Mia remained at the heart of it. Still, before the narrative could conclude, one more moment remained, simple, surprising, and filled with the type of clarity that doesn't trumpet its arrival but transforms everything. This occurred on a Thursday afternoon. Cassandra departed a board meeting early, something she never did, simply to pick Mia up herself. They proceeded directly to the center, devoid of plans or agendas, relying solely on instinct. The atmosphere buzzed with gentle energy, kids chalking up the sidewalk, someone tuning a beaten guitar in the corner. When they arrived, Evan was busy fixing the chain on a bright pink tricycle. "Hey, superstar," he called, wiping his hands as he approached. "You're just in time. We're test driving marshmallow launchers today." Mia emitted a joyful sound and reached for him. Cassandra aided her in exiting the car, and they wheeled over to the action's perimeter. Yet something felt off. Mia's hands fidgeted more than usual. Her eyes lacked focus. "Everything all right?" Evan asked gently. Cassandra knelt beside her daughter. "She's been quieter than usual all week." Evan squatted down beside them. "Mind if I try something?" He retrieved a spoon from his back pocket, part of a project they were developing to assist a younger child with grip strength. It was lightweight, curved, and easier to manage. He extended it to Mia. "She may not be hungry," Cassandra said softly, but Evan didn't feed her. Instead, he merely handed the spoon to her and sat back. After a lengthy pause, Mia grasped it, this time not just holding but scooping. Her hands trembled, the spoon tilted, but she successfully brought it up to tap Evan's knee, leaving an invisible smear of soup on his jeans. He blinked. "Wait," he whispered. "Was that my turn?" Mia giggled, a sound sharp, clear, and brimming with pride. Cassandra halted, her throat tightening, not merely due to the gesture, but for the symbolism it represented. The child who had consistently been fed, who had always waited for others to meet her where she was, had initiated the first move. And it hadn't unfolded in a clinical or therapeutic setting. It transpired right there, with a modified spoon and a man clad in paint-splattered jeans. "I've never seen her do that," Cassandra murmured softly. Evan smiled. She simply needed a reason to try. Cassandra slowly sat down beside them, her knees touching the pavement, her eyes brimming before she could hold back. Mia twisted the spoon around again, grinning, and at that moment, no one spoke. Not the children, not the volunteers, just the tranquil wind gliding past the edges of the old church building. Just a mother, a daughter, and the waiter who hadn't glanced up because he had been looking in the right direction all along. Cassandra reached for her daughter's hand. "You did that," she whispered, though it remained unclear whether her words were directed at Mia or Evan. Later that evening, after the center had emptied and the sun sank low behind the trees, Evan found Cassandra sitting by the garden beds located behind the building, absently plucking at blades of grass. "Thank you," she said without lifting her gaze. "I didn't do anything," he replied. "You listened. You created space. That's greater than what most people ever accomplish." Evan settled beside her. "I once believed I had to be significant," she confessed, "to be useful, to earn my place in this world. But watching Mia tonight, watching you over these past few weeks, I think I've been evaluating everything incorrectly." He nodded slowly. "It's easy to mistake noise for significance." She smiled, a bit melancholic. "Yeah." Then she turned to him, asking, "So what now?" He shrugged. "We continue to show up. We keep listening. That's always been sufficient." Cassandra reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the thermos. "I brought soup," she said. He chuckled. "I knew I liked you for a reason." They sat in silence, sipping tomato bisque from paper cups in the dark. Nothing extravagant, nothing prepared. Just two individuals sitting still for once. And finally, it felt like enough. Some stories don't conclude with applause or headlines. Some simply wrap up with soup and a newfound understanding of what matters most.